So we're back live, and we have the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition folks with us, and want to welcome Brian. Would you like to introduce your guest?
Absolutely. So thank you for the invitation and the time to meet. It's been nice. It's been a couple of years since we've been up here and done things on Zoom, but this is Leanna Capagna and Ramsey Mellish, and they're both new members to our organization. They're from Addison County, and I'll let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their businesses later. We're here today representing the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, and we've done this annually now. We've been an organization for 10 plus years. We have about 75 active farm members. We've got we started 10 years plus ago with 12 original members who still are all on our board of directors. And these two young farmers have been brought in along with another one that are also on our board now. So 75 members, farm members, and then some 30 plus supporting business members from the ag community and fuel dealers, grain dealers, and whatnot. So our goals and missions, basically we started out water quality. That was our main focus. We were part of the RAPs. We were involved in all those discussions and glad to be. Mission is, to have sustainable ag, improving air and water quality, and protecting our waters and air and all of the things for the environment, but still trying to be sustainable on our farms and survive. So that's our main goal and mission. We've had some transition within our organization over the last year. We had 2 years ago, we had our first executive director, John Roberts, who most of you probably know, who's moved on to FSA. And
he moved to a good spot.
He's done. Hopefully it'll help out the ag community, right, across the state. So we hired a new executive director, BJ Matherus, and BJ, I think, met you earlier in the year, but BJ's been a real benefit for us. He's building our outreach and our collaboration with other groups. We've got our goal to work more with the other farmer watershed groups, meaning FWA up north and Connecticut River organizations, and also with other organizations, related to the ag industry, the grass farmers, NOFA, and others. I should say, predominantly we're from Addison and Chittenden County. We have a few Rutland County members, and we're predominantly conventional dairy. That is the main number of farmers that are involved, but organic beef, Ramsey and Leanna, both organic dairy, and Ramsey beef also. He can tell you more about that, but beekeepers, veggie growers, some goats, some sheep. So it's a pretty diverse group. We're part of many different organizations. I've been working on the PES program for over 3 years now, and we're finally excited to get this pilot program going. And thank you for your funding for that. I met yesterday with the state conservation districts at a water quality partnership meeting yesterday. We go to all of these things that are impacting ag. We want to have a voice at the table and be supportive of.
Do you have a real active conservation district?
Unfortunately, I have to be honest with you, in Addison County, almost virtually zero. We have one part-time staff member, and we have one other person that works through the NRCS office to help do land treatment planning, like for your nutrient management plans. And I actually spoke with Jill Arachi yesterday, who's the director, at the state level, and said, Jill, come on, this is one of the largest agricultural communities in the state. Well, we're going to hire a new one. We just got money to hire a new person, but the other two are both retiring. So we're not gaining a lot unless we get a real young, enthusiastic, hardworking person to come out there and try to fill some shoes that we're missing. So, yeah, that's, and you know, like with the PES program, they want the conservation districts to help manage those. How's one person going to manage Addison County if even 20 farmers signed up for this? That's going to be a huge undertaking for that person alone. So the funding for the district is critical, and it's a little scary. As involved as I have been with the PES, you know, and they want to follow the NRCS CSP program, which is a very extensive program to get signed up in for farmers, and then to have, you know, the PES piggybacked on that. It's a great concept, but I'm quite concerned, knowing as much as I know, and I'm in the CSP program with NRCS already, so I know, you know, how detailed it is and the application process and everything, and what a farmer has to put forth for that. It's much more extensive than the traditional EQIP programs through NRCS. So I have some concerns, you know, how many farmers are going to join, how many, you know, and then if a lot do show an interest, where's the TA going to be to help these farmers get signed up and enrolled?
Yeah, see, we have in Orleans County, a very active conservation district, Meadowy Valley.
Absolutely.
Which will be stealing Hillary Solomon.
Even the Connecticut River with Jennifer Byrne, you know, that's what we need. We need,
yeah,
you know, and we've been through the challenges. I was going to say with our organization is we work very closely with UVM. And of course, Jeff Carter retired after 30 some odd years. Yeah. Kirsten Workman was one of his staff personnel. She left and went to Cornell.
Yeah, you lost.
So we lost, and they were our treasurer and secretary of this organization. So, you know, we had a big hit this year. We made it through. We've come out, you know, on the other side, but we had 2 new staff, UVM staff people just put in place recently, but they're new. They're learning the area. They're learning the farmers. I think there's a lot of promise. I'm on the hiring committee with UVM for Jeff's position. Yeah. Fortunately, UVM, with a close relationship, allowed one of us to be on that hiring committee. And we just wrapped up interviews, and we're hoping to get in-person interview. We did them over Zoom, but we're hoping to get in person sometime in April. But then UVM still has to go through all their dynamics before they actually offer someone the job. So it could be fall before that person's in place. And so it's unclear still, you know, what we'll have for that. But there's been a couple good applicants that show promise. So hopefully we can get one of them. Yeah. You know, that's the other thing. It's UVM extension. We've learned that the structure of it is complicated for extension. They have to
They're
be
so broad. Their mission is so broad.
It is. It's very broad, and there's not a lot of, I should say, areas for promotion within the structure that they have. Yeah. We've heard from Dr. Roy Beckford. He's been quite surprised since he came on, you know, at the structure. But so yeah, you know, we educate other farmers with field trials in the summer. We get right out on the farms. With conjunction with extension, you know, whether it's cover crops or manure injection, any of those practices, we try to host workshops, and we're going to do more of that this year now that COVID is finally at bay. We can get back out the fields, get people together. Community outreach, we're working on a lot of that. We also hired a program director, a young gal part-time. She's doing her master's in communications, and she's come on, and she's going to actually, her main focus for us right now is bringing in new members, but also putting in information into that statewide database for the EPA on water quality practices. Because as you know, right now, the only information that goes in there is what's cost shared through either NRCS or PMP from the state or FAP. A lot of farmers are doing a lot on their own. Yeah. I mean, we're cover cropping, we're not getting it paid for through those cost shares. Some we are, but you know, there's a lot going above and beyond. That needs to be in that database. So the EPA, I mean, we're already being complemented with 97% of the phosphorus reduction. It's actually probably higher if the amount of acres that we're doing on our own get entered. So this program director, she'll be doing that. She'll be helping organizing field trips. UVM Extension in that Middlebury office has got another person that's going to help her with that, work closely with us. We're starting a workforce development program with the career centers, the vocational centers, the one in Middlebury, in the Middlebury High School. We're hoping to incorporate Mount A, Virgins, the local high schools, and conjunction with Middlebury College as an environmental science class that they want to work with this and work with the younger students. And we want to get them out on the farms and let them be part of, this learning more about the environment, soil health, all of that, water quality. So we've got a grant pending right now. And if we get that grant, we'll put our program director on full-time. So we'll have 2 full-time staff. So we've grown a lot. And then we have a communications director, Sarah Audette, who she does like our social media posts and she helps organize advertising. We do a thing on the radio, the local radio stations in the spring, just saying, hey, what's that green field? It's cover crops. They entered over and just the public perception. That's where we need to work more. We haven't done a lot of that. And we want
There's fewer of you and more residents that don't understand that.
Exactly.
So that's really important.
and work with the local newspapers and media to do different things. So we do a newsletter where we typically will highlight a member, and that goes out to 200 and something people that reaches that we do, and highlight an active member in their farm. So, and that goes out to, even people who aren't members quite a bit of outreach. BJ's really brought on initiative for young farmers, and these 2 are examples. Most of us are 55 and over, that part of the organization. So it's just like anything with the dairy industry and the ag industry in Vermont. So I mean, that's our group in a nutshell, and I'd like these 2 to take some time to tell you about their businesses and what their concerns and looking ahead as we go down the road.
No, that's great, and it's great to see younger people are coming along and wanting to do it, and hopefully can make a living at doing it.
We hosted a get together the other night in Ferrisburg, where we moved our offices to. We were in the Middlebury Extension office, but with all their new hires, we've lost our office space. So we leased the space in Ferrisburg where we have some office space. And we had a gathering last Monday evening where we had 35 young farmers come from, even a farmer came down from Isle of Lamont to see what we were doing.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of young interest, and I want to let them have their time.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Hi, y'all. Good morning. My name's Leanna Compagna. I did want to start off with, it's not associated with this, but I was one of the farmers that testified a few weeks ago on behalf of the organic farmers. And I want to thank you all for the work you have done to help support the organic dairy farmers in our state. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from other farmers and how appreciative they are of that. And I think it is right now keeping a lot of farmers hanging on. So that's really good.
Hopefully we can convince our colleagues that this is very, very important.
It is. And some of them will still sell out, I think. But the difference is they're going to need to pay off debts that they owe to other local businesses. So it's still going to have a major impact economically. And it may also, like, in a sense, save the farm, keep it in the family, and still actively working, just maybe not as a dairy farm. But I wanted to thank you all for that. So
I hope it allows people, if they really make the change, to continue.
Exactly, just paying that debt off that they have accumulated over this past year may open up doors, opportunities to still stay in an agricultural business on our farm. So you hate to see them closing down or getting absorbed by other businesses. So to reiterate actually what I said a few weeks ago, I grew up on a dairy. My family moved to Vermont when I was 6 years old. My parents were actually conventional dairy farmers at that time. We did expand at one point, and that did not work out for my family. And we ended up, my parents decided to go organic in 2007. The farm was transitionable as is because there had not been any herbicides or pesticides sprayed on the land, so we didn't have to go through the 3-year transition. It was the same year I went to school. I was a 2+2 student, so I had a full ride to BBC and UVM. Graduated with my bachelor's in animal science with a minor in business. I met my husband while I was in school. We both worked on an array of farms. My husband did some custom cropping for an operation for a while. We worked on bigger farms, and organic farms, and ultimately in 2012, we moved back to my parents' farm. So while we were there, we expanded the herd, and then we expanded a second time to a second farm, which is where we are now. We moved in 2016 to Whiting, where my husband and I manage 250 organic cows, and we have just about 1,300 acres that we also manage in hay and pasture.
So you're one of the 3 larger.
Yes,
organic
yes, in
dairies.
this state. In this state, we're considered one of the larger organic dairies. Honestly, when I testified a few weeks ago, it was heartbreaking to hear how financially strapped so many of my counterparts are. We have been able to, you know, our cost of production's more diluted because of the number of animals that we milk. So we're very fortunate for that. But at the same time, with the drought and like the operational loan we took out, it's not something we could sustain multiple years in a row. And right now, like my family's working on transitioning the dairy to mine and my husband's ownership. We're working through Vermont Farm Viability,
Yeah.
which is that's a great resource for younger farmers who are trying to come up with creative ways to transition farms, build partnerships. In our case, it's a generational transition. So they're helping, you know, we're working through that program. We're working with Land for Good, and we're figuring out, you know, just how much the farm needs to sell for so that my parents can retire and not live in a cardboard box, right? And my husband and I will be viable for years to come. So
Yeah, there's a real balance.
yes, you know, and you can't tip too far one way or the other, right? Because if you met my parents, you knew them, and I know so many other farm parents are the same. They want to see their kids succeed, but at the same time, they can't bury themselves in the process, right?
Yeah.
It has to go both ways. I can't expect them just to hand it over. They can't do that. So anyways, so going into some of the challenges that young farmers are facing is one of them is, you know, the capital costs, the initial investment into the transition of buying the farm. When we bought that farm, my parents bought that farm, it was a little over $1 million. And just to buy cattle and equipment on that farm and us renting that place, we're looking at over $1 million investment. Now that's fun going to the banks and saying, hey, no big deal. The organic industry is not great right now, but we want a little over $1 million. So I argue one of the big hurdles that young farmers are looking at and why you're not seeing more go into this industry is the capital investment. They just can't get the funds to do it. I mean, these people are not scared of the work. They're not scared of the time commitment. They're not scared of getting creative and getting their families involved and how do you work that. It's just getting the money, which goes into the other issue of land availability. You can't afford the land.
Well, the other day I was going through my Country Folks magazine.
Mhm.
There was a little farm out in New York, say 185 acres.
Mhm.
You know, a couple of, the farmhouse, but a hired hand house and, you know, hit for 200-foot farm. $1,000,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
180 acres.
Mhm.
It wasn't all tillable either.
No.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big cost, expense.
Mhm. So a lot of the younger people you do see getting into, especially the dairy industry, are ones that are going into partnership or taking over for their parents. So it's, you know, family farms, but I mean, as Ramsey will tell you, there's a lot of people who want to get into farming that are not from farming background, and they need to have access. There just isn't that access. And I think one of the cool things that ties into who we are is a lot of your younger farmers, your younger generation are very mission driven. You know, we grew up in a generation that is more conscientious of the environmental impact of our practices. It wasn't that long ago where you just had to make more milk. And then just when I went to school alone, that whole tide was changing where it's like, okay, your cows have to be comfortable to make more milk. Your cows have to have good nutritious feed coming from well-maintained soils to make more milk. Grain is not cheap anymore. You're going to make more money if you can grow good crops on your own soils. So we're a more mission-driven, environmentally conscientious group. Not that older generations are as well, but we're all still learning. And where that can get limiting for us on our farm, and I know for other organic farmers, is there's not a whole lot of research in organic practices for, you know, a lot of times even like with no-till crops, it's very, a lot of that research is done on conventional corn and conventional grains. And we do no-till cover crops on our pastures and haylands, which, so anyways, which again, it will reduce the erosion and also extend the life of your pastures. We are, you know, practicing and researching and kind of trial and erroring new species into our pastures. How do we get more native species into our pastures and diversify the species? Last year's drought was a huge eye opener. You need to have that variety for the dry years, the wet years. That diversity makes a big difference. So anyways, another, I think, concern, I mean, at the end of the day, one of the reasons why I joined this group was to become more informed, more educated on what's available to our state, also to be proactive versus reactive. And also, if I can be an asset to other organic farmers and young farmers in building financial and environmental resiliency, I want to. I'm typically not shy. So I wanted to be part of that narrative, that voice. And I think for my generation, financial resiliency is a big concern. As far as market availability, you guys are the Ag Committee, you know there's not a lot of diversity in markets, especially in the dairy industry. We, as organic farmers, we got basically Organic Valley. That's been a pretty good co-op for us. Yeah, there's two. It's in Stonyfield. And majority of our milk at Organic Valley goes to Stonyfield, so even that's a little.
They said, they testified though a few weeks ago that they're putting $30 million into their plant and expanding out, even though the price is kind of rough right now. They think that it's gonna get better and
Yep, Stonyfield?
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. We'll see how that goes.
Well, hopefully they're gonna start paying them better. But they said with the amount of milk and then with COVID, the sales dropped off because you could get cheaper products. And hopefully they're hoping that that's gonna stay stable and start turning around and getting better. So.
Yes, so I think as organic farmers, we have a couple of concerns in the immediate future, and that part of that is, you know, we're dealing with inflation, right? So a lot of people who may have been buying organic before are choosing to buy cheaper products or no-name organic products. And a lot of times people don't check their labels and don't realize that cheaper organic products come from a country that has a quarter of the regulations we do here. And how organic is that organic product, right? We're held to very high standards as far as environmental and animal welfare. And the other thing that I think we run into is the fact that the standards that VOF holds me to are not necessarily the same as the standards being held to the large organic dairies in Texas. So for example, they lost their, what's the word I'm looking for here? they got in trouble because of the way.
They're raising their calves and.
Yes,
and all.
but they appealed that. So during the appeal time, that Texas organic certifying agent, the state, can still certify those huge dairies. And those organic dairies provide like 30% of all the organic milk produced in the country. So think about, I can't, as a 200, you say like I'm one of the big ones in the state, but on a national scale, I'm like this
Yeah,
tiny
you're
little
tiny.
speck. And I can't compete with an organic dairy that's milking 5,000 cows. Like,
No.
you can't do that.
Just think
Right,
if
you
you
can't
only
do
had 50 or
Right.
75, the average, I think, is like 75 to 80 in Vermont.
Our co-op's average is still 75 too.
Yeah,
Yep. And then, so yeah, and so, I mean, we talk a lot about financial resilience, but I'd argue that there are other things that definitely cause even more, just as much stress. And we have so much regulation that we have to stay in compliance with, and it can get very stressful and scary, and it causes an immense amount of anxiety trying to keep up with it sometimes. Like when you have one agency coming here, but then you have your co-op coming here, but then the DFA animal regulations over here, and half the time they don't all comply with each other.
well, that's not good.
No, it does not. So I've got like one animal for welfare acts over here saying you need to segregate this animal when she's sick from the rest of the herd, right? That you have to have gates in place, blah, blah, blah. Organic Valley's telling me, no, these are group animals. You need to have your cows group housed at all times. So my point is with the amount of regulation and paperwork and application we are doing, it can be immensely stressful and cause an immense amount of anxiety because of the fear that you're going to screw something up that's going to put your farm in jeopardy. Right or wrong or in between, it's just, I know it's something that it's not just me as one of the people that do all that paperwork. It's a concern and a complaint I've heard multiple farmers say. Benefit being one of the younger farmers, I've had to do it most of my farming career. Farmers that have been farming for 20, 30 plus years get immensely frustrated with that. I think there is a large amount of programs and grants and accessibility to things, but it's hard and overwhelming, and a lot of times farmers don't know those resources are available. Many farmers are not well spoken enough to even get grants written in a way to get them considered. They don't know the right catchphrases or trigger words, and they may be the farms that truly need the funding, but they don't have that person available to them to write it the way it needs to be heard. I think having those kind of resources are important to farmers.
Now, Gus has grant writers over at BHCB. I don't know if you've ever run into that group, but we set that up
That's great.
maybe like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So
And
how do we get farmers to hear that that's available,
Well,
right?
We also asked the agency at one point to come up with a kind of a funnel where people could go with
for
questions.
info.
Yeah.
If we get this next grant, we're gonna put a person in place in our organization to do just that.
Even
Yes.
better.
This program will work
Yep.
better for you on this
Yeah.
barnyard stack site you wanna make or whatever.
Yep.
We're gonna put a person in place. I know I spoke with Deputy Secretary Allison Eastman about this before we decided to write the grant. I said, I don't wanna compete with the ag department. She's like, Brian, we don't even have a funding line for that yet. It'll be 3 to 5 years before we would get it in place. Go for it, do it. We'll help you, support you how we
That's what I
can.
was just gonna say is the
So-
support will be,
You know, we hope to do that. Have that
That's-
person go to the farmer and say,
Yeah.
Sure,
this would be your best.
we did that for across
Well-
the street.
We can find out.
Yeah.
But there should be a one main number to call, an email address to use, a phone number, something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where if a farmer has a question about what grants are available, what help's available, it should.
what programs through NRCs are best fitted, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
Because when you have that, and like Brian said, we're working on that, and I think that's gonna be a huge benefit to our group. having that resource available to farmers.
Yeah, the closer that person can be to the people that need it, the
Yeah.
better.
It's not gonna be an outside TA person, which we feel is huge. It's gonna be somebody in our organization that is in reach with already 75 farmers, but spread it statewide, because to employ them full-time, we would need to do that, you know? And be able to be in these other organizations too.
But you
talking to
take
them.
like the Working Lands program, I'm sure you've all heard of that. It's a bummer to write a grant to getting that money. I mean,
Yeah.
I got a
Rigorous.
buddy that's a lawyer, and he said he spent like 12 hours putting that grant together and didn't succeed.
That young man is the caretaker on my farm that works at Boykins. Just last Friday submitted a grant at 4 minutes of midnight, putting together a 19.5 page grant.
Yeah.
I read those
It's a lot of
grants.
Work and time, and it's very disappointing when you don't, the amount of time and labor you put into that and not get the funds. Yep.
I read those grants the first 5 years I was on that board
Oh, you were?
when it originated back, what, 7 or 8 years ago now.
Yeah, 10, 12.
10, 12, yeah, whatever it was. I was up there for 5 years. And it was amazing to see the difference in the quality of grants. And unfortunately, the top quality grants rise, you know,
Yep.
the better written grants rise to the top. And like Leanna said, probably that lower quality grant that wasn't as attractive was a farmer that really needed it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens there, right or wrong, but the more people you're reaching out to, you know, on the infrastructure and in the whole supply chain are the grants that also rise to the top. So an individual farm, say they want to put in a cheese thing, they're only doing it for their own cheese. Well, it's attractive and it's a great idea. But if I'm gonna put it in a cheese cave and I'm gonna call the other 10 cheesemakers to come bring it here, boom, that's the grant that rises to the top. Because you do have to meet the criteria, right? We need to spend the money wisely. So sometimes that Working Lands, I mean, it's great, but you know, it's complicated, it's rigorous, it's
So
challenging.
the big dog gets the meat and the little dog gets the bones.
And I won't say that all the time, but it tends to flow that way. I mean, the more impact you have statewide, the better chance you're gonna get that grant. So it's very rigorous and challenging for an individual farm to go that channel. Whereas, you know, there may be some other grant opportunities, but we really want to put that person in place that'll know all the grant opportunities that are out there and be able to help an individual farmer, you know, get some of this funding. I mean, there's tremendous amount of funding, we all know, and there's more coming in. I mean, at that, yesterday, NRCS was saying there's billions coming in by 25, not millions, billions coming in to their programs. But they don't have the personnel to sign up the farmers either.
Get the money.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, so a lot of times the idea is good, but the way it all shakes out isn't the results you expect, right? And so you've got these great farmers who should be people that are trying to access funds and whatnot, and they either don't have the time, don't take the time, or are overwhelmed by the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're the ones doesn't make them less quality of a farmer.
And if you guys had a good working conservation district, like ours up north, it goes and helps farmers write these grants.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
And,
That's
you
their
know,
role.
they have professionals in there that,
Yep.
and so they get some of the money.
Yep. I do want, so I've been a member of this group for a short period, I've just joined the board. I do want to commemorate how much I've learned just in the short time I've been there. It is a great resource for our area. A very knowledgeable group of farmers as far as learning about the environmental impact that we can have, the stewardship of the land. I learned that I've got practices in place that didn't even realize would qualify for some of the funding that's out there. I'm like, geez, we've been doing this for years because we have to.
Yeah.
It's just part of. So, you know, that's really cool. I think, you know, where policymakers can come into when we implement new environmental policy and changes and regulations that farmers need to meet, we need to also be thinking about the cost to the farmers there, because margins are small and oftentimes there's not a return or an immediate return. And I know even within my own co-op, when they make a change for the sake of the animals, it's the animal welfare issue, let's say. For example, you know, let's say you're not allowed to tether the calves anymore. They all have to be in free housing, which is fine. We fall in that anyways, but there are a lot of smaller dairies and tie stalls who tether calves through.
Yeah.
Well, when you have to change that whole infrastructure and invest into it, and you're not, our co-op saying, sorry, you gotta do it with your own money, causes a lot of grumbling and can sometimes be the catalyst of why people choose not to farm anymore,
We
right?
always
So,
tethered our calves behind the cows.
there you go. Yeah, right?
Never thought a thing about it. you know,
Right,
that-
right. And trying, you know, and it's not to say it's right or wrong. The more we learn, the more we realize there's certain practices that have to change for the better of the animals, the better of the land. But sometimes the change doesn't happen because there isn't the funds to make the change. Because you're not gonna gain that extra income per month because of that change. It's only gonna cost you.
Yeah.
So I think when policy is taken into consideration, we also have to consider the cost to the farmer and how can we get that implemented in a way where, you know, the farmers can afford to do it.
We, I don't know, I guess just for your knowledge, we did a task force report from meetings last summer. And it costs Vermont farmers $1.70 a hundredweight more to produce milk in Vermont because of our environmental rules and laws and regulations compared to our neighboring states like New Hampshire, Mass, or New York.
I would believe that 100%. And it's not to say that there won't be long-term benefits to that as far as
Oh,
keeping
no.
our waterways clean and whatnot. But our farmers, so like you just said, it's costing $1.70 more, but they're not getting paid $1.70 more either,
Oh,
It's
heck
just-
no.
right?
Get paid less sometimes because you're further from the market.
Exactly.
Especially if you're up in Orleans County.
Yeah,
So anyways, those are some of the major concerns on my end as a young farmer. I mean, again, financial resilience and long-term environmental resilience is, and as far as, you know, as the committee can go, you know, there's always the concern of stabilizing milk prices and making sure that, you know, we're at a price that keeps the farms viable. You know, I think land access is going to become a bigger and bigger issue in the state as the value of land increases, and it's going to become more difficult to get young people involved. I think our work with the technical schools and with Middlebury College is, I think we'll have some really positive impacts being younger people interested. I know my husband and I set a goal for him this year. I'm like, we're having one school tour this year. We're gonna do a younger class. I'm like, and they're coming to the farm. I'm like, next year we'll aim for 2 school tours. Because those, I mean, I'm 33 and my husband's 34. We got 30 plus more years in this industry. Those are gonna be our future consumers.
Yeah.
And again, it's better to be proactive than reactive, right? And regardless if they buy dairy or not, I want them to know that what we do makes an impact on their surroundings.
sure does.
Mhm.
I keep saying to people, a lot of the people that are around us now are suburban people
Yes.
living in a rural setting. And it's not their fault, but they don't know what it's like to grow up in a rural place.
Right, right. And the only way we can overcome that is with education.
And we've got a bill we're working on, just about ready to vote it out, I hope, on the right to farm law.
Mhm.
So that as these people do keep moving closer and closer, that, you know, there's some protection for our farmers
That's
because of
appreciated.
odor and flies and things that just come with farming that some people aren't accustomed to.
Right, it takes one incident out of context that can completely ruin the narrative, right? I mean, honestly, a perfect example is we had a cow that got knocked down in our freestall yesterday. She's 13 years old and her legs went out from under her. But you use this, she was not hurt by us moving her, but she had to be taken out with a skid steer, right? She's hurt. But if you see that, if you take a picture of that,
Yeah.
what kind of image does that paint? Now, meanwhile, she's back up. We brought her outside, got her on dirt. She was able to stand back up. It's gonna take some time to strengthen, the muscle and the tendons. Again, she's 13. She's an older cow. They take this.
Yeah, that's unusual.
Right, but if you see the whole picture, that you would know we did the right thing and we're caring for this animal. But if you take that one moment where she's covered in manure in the skid steer bucket, that's ugly. Well, I would argue when someone's sick and in a hospital bed, take that out of context, that's ugly too. And people don't always realize the bigger picture of it all. So anyways, I could sit here and talk all day. I should give Ramsey a chance.
Ramsey a shot.
We gotta get Ramsey in for a few minutes.
All right, couple quick minutes.
Yeah.
Couple quick minutes.
Well, welcome.
My colleagues or peers at the coalition, they nailed all of the topics, I think, really well. So I don't have a ton to say, I guess. I'll leave you with a little story, I guess. I was born in Rutland, grew up in New Hampshire, not from an ag family. I have many generations of Vermonters, though, most of which worked the factories that are in shambles now in Springfield. But long line of Vermonters. I got into ag on a whim. Right, so he's going to Keene State College, studying architecture, started working on a dairy farm to make some extra money. And I fell in love with that and with farming. And I guess I am like maybe one of a few of us, maybe there's a couple first generation farmers in our group. John, yeah. So I think, I'm kind of an anomaly. There's a few of us, like I said. My wife and I, we started farming in Orleans County in Newport Center. That's Orleans, right?
Yeah, you're right next to where I live.
Yeah, so we started farming right on the Route 100 south of town. We got started with an FSA loan that used the cattle as collateral. I don't know if the FSA still does that, but that's how we got in. And I think what I'll speak to is, like Leanna mentioned, access to land, right? So as we, the coalition, think about the future, I think we often are talking about how do young people access land and how do we carry on this legacy in Vermont, which I think is part of what Vermonters want. I think as Vermonters, we'd like to see these farms continue forward. And so part of my mission and the mission of my business is to develop a model of farming that works, right? So we sell milk currently to Stonyfield, and we milk 180 organic cows. Over the past few years, we've diversified our farm to some degree and have made pretty major investments in that diversification, selling meat direct to consumers. My wife is actually probably today in Heinsberg trying to open a farm stand, and we'll continue to evolve our business. But I think it's important that we as Vermonters continue to bear in mind that if the farms don't have a second generation coming in, or a next generation, I should say, what is the fate of those farms? I think it's worth keeping that in our minds as we, or as you all continue to do work on behalf of us. It makes, it could be everything. The future of ag in Vermont kind of lies in the hands of people that allow accessibility to land, and typically it's bankers. And part of the work that we do as the coalition, I think, is to engage some of those partners. And the story that I'll leave you with, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying this, but so my wife and I purchased John Roberts' farm 7 or 8 years ago. And there was no connection. When I was looking for a farm to rent, I would drive from our house in New Hampshire all over these back roads, knocking on doors, looking for a farm to rent. And John's place was empty at the time. And it was one of the farms that I knocked on. And his farm at the time had a price tag that I didn't have collateral for. I didn't have any sort of down payment on. So I had to start smaller, which we did. We did that up north in Vermont, or up north in Newport, and added cows and bought cows and kind of expanded. And eventually we circled back to John, and we pulled it off. We made a land deal happen. The FSA was involved, and Vermont Ag Credit, or VITA, they hold the mortgage on the farm. And so those two organizations are important. And John will tell you a story. John came here from England for the same reason, land accessibility. So John left his rural upbringing in England to come to Vermont to pursue the same opportunity. So if these opportunities don't persist, Vermont is losing something.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important that we keep these things in mind. And I know the coalition has tried to bring these partners in, and I think in the future will continue to do so, being some of these banking entities and even government entities such as the FSA.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Well, it's interesting because I think when all of the purchase and development rights programs went into place, nobody imagined that an acre of farmland, in my town along the river selling for $500 an acre. And, how does anybody that's just getting started afford that? And now you've got land that doesn't have development rights on it. People sold development rights to move to the next generation, and now we're burning out. What do you do now that generation is getting older? And I don't think we've got a good grasp on what to do.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone, including the bankers, have a good grasp on what to do. And I think that ultimately people like Leanna and I, our responsibility in one hand is to basically secure the future of agriculture. We have to develop a profitable model. And if we don't, it just doesn't matter. And when we see Vermonters investing 9.2 million or whatever we decided on to essentially subsidize organic milk, kind of does put the responsibility back on us to make sure that the decisions we make have long-lasting impacts. We have to find profitability in agriculture, or
Yeah.
who knows? I guess we won't have to have this meeting in the future, but I don't think that that's the scenario. I believe that there is a way, and that's essentially why Leanna and I are here. Part of the coalition is to bring young people in to, get a bunch of brains sitting in the same room thinking about these things. And the coalition has done a great job of facilitating that for us. And hopefully it's reciprocal, so we can go out and, be amongst our community members and feel like we're coming up with some progress.
What is organic milk on the farm selling for now?
You mean direct to consumer? Or do you mean
direct
to
the
Stonyfield?
Stony Fields or Organic Valley?
Yeah, so Leanna can tell you what Organic Valley's paying.
So last year in 2022, our farm, after premiums as well, we averaged $33.50 a hundredweight, which sounds like a substantial amount, but when you take in the inflation rate, it just didn't match. Also, I would like to point out the fact that the cost of organic milk on the shelf right now is $12 to $14 a gallon. So we're getting paid 33 cents a pound, right? And it's getting charged. And so at points in our earlier days, that number was a little more level, like, so, and I mean, co-ops and, new trends in food industries they go in cycles, right? You'll hear a lot of farmers that joined the organic movement in the talk about the glory years, right? The good old days when there was less regulation and more income. And some of them will even tell you when they first went organic, you didn't make more money. You didn't make more money as an organic farmer, but a lot of them believed in what they were doing, the change in practice, and they did believe that long term it would be more sustainable because our milk price doesn't fluctuate. So the conventional milk price, last I was told yesterday, has already dropped $4 in this year. They're going to suffer this year. Please keep my conventional counterparts in your minds, because it does not benefit me or make me happy to see my conventional counterparts suffer. I'm a firm believer at the end of the day, it does not, especially in this state, our largest dairies in the state are still not large on the grand scale on a national average. It's so true. And with the amount of farms that are left in this state, I mean, at the end of the day, what actually matters is management practice, right? You have good farmers who are very small. You have bad farmers who are very small. You have good farmers who are organic, and you've got bad farmers who are organic. And at the end of the day, the amount of bad farmers has become very small. And the good ones, they are trying to continuously make improvements. And they know that they have an environmental impact, and they know they have to implement changes. And at the end of the day, so often the deciding factor is the almighty dollar bill.
Oh, sure.
Right? And I mean, I know I said this before during my hearing, it's so common for farmers to put the needs of their land and their animals before themselves. But you can only do that so long before you burn out, you lose morale. And so, yeah, we averaged $33.50 last year, which isn't bad. We get paid very heavily for solids, but as far as when you look at the cost of grain, the cost of replacement and equipment, the cost of seed has more than tripled for some, and it doesn't match the inflation rate.
Yeah, and so we sell milk direct to Stonyfield, and our price was $34. So it's right there. Stonyfield, we live in this geographic area right next to this milk plant. That, like you said, the big expansion in Londonderry has huge impacts on organic fluid milk, making its way through that plant. And I think that it's also worth recognizing Stonyfield holds a whole lot of power for Vermont's organic future, or the future of farming in Vermont in general. And when I started selling milk to Stonyfield 7 years ago, they were paying me more than they are today. So, Stonyfield is
That's same with Organic Valley.
is a big conglomerate. Lactalis is the largest dairy company in the world that bought and owns that plant today, and obviously they're under pressure to keep their margins.
Well, they've got to make money to be able to pay you money and sell the products.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I hate to cut this discussion, but we got to be in Hell's Ag in 5 minutes.
Well,
Go to the floor. 5 minutes.
well,
Go to
we've
the
got
floor.
to be on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Really,
Right.
a lot
Appreciate your
for,
time. And
Appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
it's really.
It was very nice talking to
having you in, and, hopefully,
It's great to be back in person.
Yeah.
Not all hope is lost. We keep doing it, right? And we're still
Yeah.
smiling.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
very
you.
much.
Only way to
Thank
keep
you.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Brian.
Good
See you, Brian.
to see you guys. Thanks.
Well, folks, I guess we got time to get upstairs. The bell has